Chapter 27 of The Copper Princess. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Read by Betsy Bush, October 2009. The Copper Princess by Kirk Munroe. Chapter 27. A Night with a Madman. When left alone at the bottom of the ancient shaft, with the impenetrable gloom of the prehistoric workings crowding him close, Peveril had found a few minutes in which to reflect upon the strange happenings of the past half-hour. Darrell's Folly was the Copper Princess, the mine in which he owned a half-interest, the one for which he had searched so long and had almost given up hopes of finding. Was it of any value, or did the name, applied in derision, rightly describe it? And the old man who had twice attempted to take his life, whom he had just rescued from a living tomb, was his partner. How could they ever work harmoniously together? He certainly could not agree to the carrying on of further smuggling operations, and so there was a barrier to their amicable relations at the very outset. But was that man the person with whom he would have to deal after all? He was evidently crazy, and probably had been from the very first, for Peveril now remembered that Mr. Ketchum had hinted at something of the kind during their last interview. As a crazy man could not legally transact business, his dealings would then be with Ralph Darrell's heirs or legal representatives. Who were those heirs? Were they any other besides his daughter, Mary? He hoped not. What a brave, splendid girl she was, and how pleasant it would be to discuss business plans with her. How absurd of him not to have recognized her at once, even in her boyish costume, and how stupid she must think him. He wished those fellows up above had not been in such a hurry with that rope, for there were a lot more questions he wanted to ask her, so many that he would not have objected if he and she had been left down there together ever so much longer. How different the old mine seemed now to what it had when he first knew it. Hereafter it would always be associated in his mind with memories of a slight figure that he had been permitted to hold for a single minute, a flushed face, a pair of glorious eyes, and a voice that he should never forget. How shy she was, and at the same time how dignified, how sweet and womanly in her anxiety about her father. He hoped they could be friends, as all business partners should be. Of course, they could never be anything more than that, for he was not forgetting his obligation to Rose. Oh, no, not for 1 minute. How infernally slow those chaps up above were now, and why didn't they let down the rope? Were they going to keep him waiting in that beastly hole forever? It really seemed so. By a simple process of reasoning, and the putting together of the various bits of information gained from her father, Mary Darrell had reached the conclusion that the young man whose fortunes had been so strangely interwoven with hers during the past 10 days was the rightful owner of the mine that her father had claimed for so many years. She was too loyal to the latter to believe for a moment that he had consciously attempted to defraud Peveril of his rights, but credited all his actions to the sad mental condition of which she had only now become aware. "Poor dear papa," she said to herself. "He has done splendidly to take care of me for so long as he has, and now I will take care of him. We will go away from this horrid place, where he gets so excited, and find some little home in the East, where he can rest until his mind is wholly restored. In the meantime this Mr. Peveril can have the old mine, to do with as he pleases. I shall let him know that we consider it his property before he has a chance to even make a claim against it. I mustn't let him see for a moment how badly we feel about it, though, for he seems very nice, and has certainly placed us under a great obligation by coming to our rescue so splendidly. I wonder how he knew that papa and I were down in that awful place." Having got her father to his room, told Aunty Nimmo to prepare for company, and hurriedly changed her dress, Mary Darrell greeted the expected guests according to her privately arranged programme, and invited them in to supper. After seeing them seated at the table and provided with a bountiful meal, she left them on the plea that her father needed her attention. The girl had not been gone many minutes, and Peveril's friends were still congratulating him upon having come into his fortune, at the same time speculating whether the Folly was worth anything or not, when she re-entered the room with a frightened expression on her face, Addressing herself to Major Arkell, she said, "Would you mind coming up to see my father, sir? I fear he is very ill." The major at once complied with his request, and after he had gone, Captain Spillins said, "I shouldn't wonder if the old fellow played out, and left you in sole possession of the Princess after all, Mr. Peveril." "Which princess are you meaning, captain?" asked Mike Connell. "Sure it seems to me there's two of them." "Have a care, Connell," said Peveril, warningly. "Remember the circumstances under which we are here." "I beg your pardon, Mr. Peril," exclaimed the Irishman, contritely. "I'd near forgot that you are already bespoke." A hot flush sprang to the young man's cheek, but ere he could frame a reply Major Arkell reappeared, looking greatly worried. "Boys," he said, "we've a very serious case on our hands, and one that demands immediate action. The old man upstairs is fairly out of his head, besides being in a high fever. He needs medical attendance as quickly as it can be got to him, and careful nursing. I have given him an opiate, which I hope will keep him quiet for a while, and now I propose to go to Red Jacket in the tug for a doctor and a nurse. Captain Spillins will, of course, go with me, and we shall try to be back by morning. In the meantime, the poor young lady must not be left alone, or with only that old auntie who is nearly frightened out of her wits, and so I think you, Peveril, ought to stay here with Connell and do what you can. You are, in a sense, the proprietor here, you know, and as Connell has also been here before, maybe the old man will be more reasonable with you than he would be with entire strangers." "I quite agree with you that some of us ought to stay here and do what we can," said Peveril, "and under the circumstances I suppose Connell and I are the ones to do so. At the same time, I haven't had much experience in caring for madmen." "No more have I," said Connell, "but I'll do me best, for sake of the young lady, and maybe she'll forgive me for treating her the same as I would a lad." "And, Major," added Peveril, "if you will kindly fetch my luggage from the Trefethens I shall be greatly obliged." So the party separated, and while two of them wended their way back to the tug at Laughing Fish, the others prepared for the long vigil of the night. After the effect of the opiate had passed, their patient was seized with paroxysms of raving and frantic efforts to leave his bed for the purpose of protecting his property. At such times it required the united efforts of the two volunteer nurses to restrain him, and after each attack he was left weak and helpless as an infant. Then he would weep and beg piteously not to be abandoned to the mercy of his enemies. Or he would fancy himself still in the awful blackness of the ancient workings, and plead with his attendants not to be left there to die. "For the sake of my daughter, gentlemen, my only child, who has no one else in the world to love her or care for her, I beg of you to save me. If you are human, take pity on her and let me go," he would cry. At such times no voice, not even Mary's, seemed to soothe him as did that of Peveril, and his most violent struggles were controlled by the gentle firmness of the young athlete. All through that dreadful night Mary Darrell watched Peveril with tear-filled eyes, wondering at his strength and gentleness, and unconsciously loving him for them. Not that she would for an instant have admitted such a thing even to herself. She tried instead to believe that he was the cause of all this sorrow, and that she hated him for it. "In whatever he does," she said to herself, "he is actuated by remorse and a desire to atone in some way by ruining my father's life." The anxiously awaited dawn found Ralph Darrell lying quietly with closed eyes, and Peveril keeping wakeful watch beside him. Aunty Nimmo had been sent to her bed long since, and Connell was fast asleep on the floor of the hall just outside the sick-room door. Mary Darrell sat in an easy-chair, overcome by exhaustion, also sleeping lightly. As the growing light fell on her tear-stained face, crowned by a wealth of close-clipped hair curling in tiny ringlets, Peveril looked at her curiously, and wondered why he had never thought her beautiful until that moment. Apparently conscious of the young man's gaze, the girl suddenly opened her eyes, and a faint flush suffused her pale cheeks. Ere either she or Peveril could speak, the muffled sound of a steam-whistle broke the morning stillness. "Our friends have come, Miss Darrell," whispered the watcher. "You have just time to go to your room and refresh yourself with a dash of cold water before they appear." Nodding assent, the girl accepted the suggestion and departed. Then Peveril sent Connell to meet the newcomers, who, as he knew, would steam directly into the landlocked basin, and remained to finish his vigil alone. Suddenly, as he sat absorbed in meditation, the madman, who had been watching through half-closed eyes, sprang upon him without a sound of warning, and clutched his throat with a vice-like grip. Not even the utmost exertion of Peveril's splendid strength served to loose that horrid hold. In silence he fought for his life, until he grew black in the face and his eyes started from their sockets. His head seemed on the point of bursting. He reeled, staggered, and then, together with his terrible assailant, fell heavily to the floor. As they did so, the old man's head struck on a sharp corner. He uttered a moan, and at last the deadly clutch on Peveril's throat was relaxed. With his next moment of consciousness Peveril was sitting on the floor, gasping for breath, and Ralph Darrell lay motionless beside him in a pool of blood. Then came quick steps on the stair, and Mary Darrell, accompanied by Major Arkell and the doctor from Red Jacket, entered the room. For an instant the girl stared horror-stricken at the scene before her. Then she darted forward and clasped her father's body in her arms, crying out as she did so: "You have killed him, Richard Peveril, killed an old man, sick and helpless, robbed him of his all, and then murdered him! Oh, papa, dear, dear papa, why did I leave you for a single minute?" "My, how she hates poor Mr. Peril!" whispered Nelly Trefethen, who had come to act as nurse, and who, guided by Mike Connell, reached the doorway in time to witness the tableau, as well as to hear Mary Darrell's cruel words. Chapter 27